Oh boy, this is a scary patch for multiple gameplay and non-gameplay related reasons. Let's dive into what's got me shaking in my boots. Longtime KM Best fans will know that I have generally harbored a fear of the return of the Hela deck. Hela as an archetype, as a deck, is a deck that is sort of predicated on invalidating everything that happened before it in the game. A massive turn 6 explosion of power, reviving many discarded cards. This Hellcow change, making it a 4-6 again and giving it an activate ability, is very scary. The way in which you can activate this card on turn 6 after having played Hela, technically before Hela reveals, is a very scary timing thing that you now have access to. Effectively, this card basically says, add 2 cards to what your Hela is bringing back. Whatever you've discarded already throughout the game, well, now you are bringing back more stuff. I almost wonder if this is strong enough that you can just run this, some big guys, and Hela in whatever, because whatever you had in your hand, you are going to bring back with the card Hela. Now, the mechanics of this are actually very simple. You have a Hellcow face up on the board, you activate the Hellcow's ability, and then you put Hela onto the board. Since she's no longer in your hand, she can no longer be discarded, but the other 2 cards will be discarded before she reveals due to the way activate works. Scary. Now, will this be enough to bring back Hela as a whole? I am not as sure of that, but I'm definitely expecting to see a lot of it on day 1, and I definitely wouldn't be going into any game on ladder not expecting to have some big boys dropped on me. What does that mean? I think, unfortunately, what it means is Clog. It means the Storm Legion deck. It means decks that are able to say, actually, your turn 6 doesn't matter that much, right? I've already clogged this lane. I've got a cannonball face down in the other. I'm good. Or you don't actually get to play that Hela because your turn 6 isn't real. I'm good. I find it hard to believe that there are going to be a lot of decks that are going to be able to match this power for power. Maybe there will be. I don't really know. But effectively adding basically 2 free discards to a deck that's already quite good at doing what it does and at getting those cards onto the board is legitimately very scary. The normal risk for a card like Hellcow is, oh, I'm risking discarding the Hela, but the timing thing here means that you never functionally are. You are not risking discarding the Hela at any time when you play this. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't note that there were other things this card could do. For example, I think it could be an interesting inclusion in a normal discard deck. And normal discard is kind of an archetype that I have long thought is something that needs a little help. Maybe this is the kind of thing that gives it that help that it needs. Again, the kind of trick here is the ability to sequence the activate the way you need to, as opposed to the way that an on reveal would work. So, for example, in a normal discard deck, let's say you play this on turn 4, you play your MODOK on turn 5, and then your question is, when am I activating the Hellcow? I think a lot of the time it'll be after the MODOK, right? You've cleared out all the crap out of your hand, you're getting extra swarms, you're getting extra apocalypse triggers. Sometimes you don't want those extra swarms, but, we'll see. Most of the time what this is doing is juicing your Morbius more, it's creating more free 3-power dudes for you to play, it's getting more procs on your collector, and it's doing that, again, very little actual cost. Personally, I think it's good most of the time when Second Dinner adds power, adds use cases to cards like Hellcow, which are in Series 3 or below. I think that's a good thing. This specifically is the kind of card that juices some very unfun playstyles for me personally, although I realize my preferences are not universal. That said, I'm very scared of Hela, and this card makes me extremely worried for what the future of this game for the next few weeks could hold. Hela is a deck that can generate a lot of frustration, and the counters to Hela are overwhelmingly also things that generate a lot of frustration, like Clog, like decks that can lock out the game on turn 5. Things of that nature could be the direction this game is going, and I personally am worried about the potential for that. Black Swan going to 2-3 is a genuinely interesting change. Of the changes happening in this patch, this is the one that I'm the most excited about because it's the one that I feel like I have the least idea as to whether or not it's an improvement or not. If it is an improvement, that's a really cool thing for a card that really deserved one. If it's not an improvement, I think it's a fascinating exploration of the activate mechanic and what actually makes a card good and what makes a card bad. So let's talk about why it might be an improvement and then why it might not be an improvement. Why this might be an improvement is very simple. You now just get to play this card, forget about it, and then on the final turn of the game, get a bunch of guys out for free, or set up maybe not the final turn of the game, maybe you're going to like Falcon into a beast on the final turn of the game. Who knows? There's a lot that this card can now do in a way that it previously could not. Previously, in order to make this stuff happen, you would have to Falcon plus play Black Swan on turn 5. This is not typically how these decks actually play out. These decks want to be, playing some 1-drops and then falconing them back on turn 5, not Falcon Black Swan on 5. It's a very different kind of play. Adding the activate means that you'll be able to do things like play the 1-drops on 5, falcon them back, activate Black Swan, next turn, boom, 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 all the way you want to do it. So what it does is make this a more natural part of a bounce deck's curve. What it might not be as good at is the issue you run into with a card like this is it is a 2/3, and typically you want to, in early turns of bounce, actually set stuff up. The issue, I think, for this card is going to be how worth it will it be to include this card in your bounce deck in place of something that might actually impact matchups in a meaningful way. I think that a lot of the time, this will feel better than it actually is. I do wonder if it will be able to really hit those high highs, though. One of the things I've noticed about Black Swan bounce decks is that whenever I've played one or played against one in a bounce mirror, I have always felt like the Black Swan deck had an advantage in the mirror. I really have, because having that extra ability, those extra Hitmonkey procs, the extra ability to bounce stuff and make sure it gets out on the board, the way you just guarantee that you're really exploding a ton of power, there is a lot of equity in being the quote-unquote bigger bounce deck. I can imagine a pure points-focused bounce deck with Sage and Hitmonkey and all of that stuff doing really cool Black Swan stuff. I can even imagine people trying this in something like a Moon Girl deck, although I'm not sure how necessary it is given you already have Quinjet in the list. The interesting thing for me about this card is 2/3 is actually kind of a hard stat line to be good at. I realize there are many good 2/3s, but most of them are a lot better than this and require less deck building restrictions. Cards like Angela end up stacking up into more power. Cards like Jeff, we all know why Jeff is good. Kate Bishop is putting multiple cards in your hand, usually cards that are very good and impactful. This is just a body unless you draw the stuff that makes it good. I'm interested to see how this card manages to actually land. Personally, I expect it to be a bit of a role player, but it has real breakout potential in a world where points are the only thing that matters and you want to be the biggest bounce deck possible. The last of the balance changes for today is to Swordmaster, who is gaining some targeting. Now, I think a lot of people are going to look at this, and to be clear, I am kind of one of those people, and say, wow, they just added targeting to Swordmaster and kept his stats the same? That's just a 3/7 straight up? That's crazy. And I think, on balance, that is a kind of reasonable thing to think. It's like a pretty crazy thing to do. I think that, especially in the context of, some sort of Swordmaster Hellcow kind of Hela deck where you just, get to play those cards for free. Swordmaster's never discarding the Hela. Hellcow is never discarding stuff. There's some scary stuff that could happen there. But, to be clear, really scary stuff, you are still tempoing out. That is a 3/7. That is a 4/6. You are just, tempoing out, endgame Hela. Kind of scary if you are able to have, a no failure rate Hela list, not gonna lie. But the thing that strikes me about this as a specific card that makes it not as ridiculous to just add the targeting and keep it the same as what it is much harder to profitably use a Swordmaster targeting odd cards in a synergy style deck. You look at what Moon Knight is doing right now. The fact that it's targeting even cards allows you to basically hard target Agatha Harkness, bring her back with Ghost Rider, hit Black Knight. But in addition, it allows you to deck build in a certain way. Deck building with 1s, 3s, and 5s is actually much easier than deck building with 2s, 4s, and 6s because there is much more flexibility in 1s, 3s, and 5s. You can see this in how that deck almost always looks to end the game playing on turn 6 a 5 and a 1. That is the ethos of that deck. It is much harder to do that with good value if you are playing a 2 and a 4, just by virtue of what is available to you at 5, cards like Claw, and what is available to you at 4. This is the big sort of, I don't know, fly in the ointment for me about this card, where it's like, the thing I actually like about it is maybe I can just like mid-range Hela people. But when it comes to actually doing something, like let's just list the cards this doesn't hit. Most good Ghost Rider targets are 6, right? Most things you want to hit with Black Knight are going to be bigger. They're going to be 6s, right? Most things you want to bring back with Hela are 6s, right? Like you can like put an Iron Man in there and hit this, but it's like, okay, is that really worth it? I don't know. Most of the things that you want to hit in a traditional discard deck, Swarm, Apocalypse, those are even costs as well. There is one card that isn't out yet, and I kind of think this might be sort of seeding the ground for it, and that card is Scorn, sorry. A discard payoff that was data mined to come out in, I believe, next month. That is a 1-cost card that scales with the amount of times you can discard it, and that is actually a really interesting spot for this Swordmaster to be in. Hitting odd cards means that you will be able to more reasonably target that. Between Swordmaster and Colleen Wing, I think maybe you can actually get somewhere with Scorn, or at least see if something actually shows up. As far as its current metagame applications, the thought process I keep coming back to is it ever going to be profitable to play a sort of mid-range Hela style deck, where I am like trying to output meaningful points and also hybridize with my things that I actually want to hit? If so, what 5-drop am I trying to hit with this guy that I want to bring back with Hela? Because again, Hela's -2, it really wants big bodies, right? Like you want to be able to have a body that can really take the -2. One of the most important things about playing a Hela deck is just how big the Infinite is. Like, that's the body that is the biggest, that is the most able to take the -2. When you start doing stuff like Iron Man, it's like, okay, that's a -2 Iron Man? What are you going to do, Claw? That's like 10 power. You don't know where it's going to go. There's like a decent chance it goes in a lane where it doesn't actually make sense. So whenever I actually try to cook up, like, okay, let's put together mid-range Hela with Swordmaster, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Outside of that, I'm not really sure what else to do with this card. It's a big card with a downside that you want to turn into an upside, but it's the kind of downside that is actually much harder to turn into an upside than many comparable cards because of what it does and does not hit. You aren't really able to do a lot of things with 2s, 4s, and 6s, and that really hurts this card's ability to be the kind of build around that Moon Knight was. I personally wouldn't have thought that you would be able to build functional odd decks in a game like Marvel Snap, but because of the power of 3s and 5s and 1s, specific 3s, 5s, and 1s, mind you, we have functionally been able to do this. Even before the Agatha deck, Goon Knight was a deck. And so that shell has a sort of proven ability to succeed in various formats, where I think it's just much harder for a card like Swordmaster to end up on top. There is one other issue that was fixed in this patch that I think is worth highlighting, because while it's not technically a balance change, it does meaningfully impact a lot of gameplay. They say in the patch notes that they have fixed the bug with Invisible Woman and end of turn type things. That's really, really good. It means like Mystique will work under Dark Dimension now. Mystique will work under Invisible Woman now. Good things are happening for the interactions that were otherwise non-functional. One of the edge cases here involved a ghost spider that was returned to hand, not properly targeting things. And I hope that that has also been fixed, because I personally believe that if there was this perpetual glitch with Ghost Spider and Beast right as Aranya came out, that would be approximately the worst time for that to happen. I think that it is an edge case that was fixed here, but there is no indication in the notes that that is true. So I would like people to let me know, because I do think it would be kind of an unfortunate situation if it turned out that this card, Ghost Spider and Bounce, doesn't actually work some of the time for reasons unknown to anybody, right as they release Madam Web and Aranya in the move season, that sort of encourages you to like repeat Ghost Spider stuff in a way that like you really don't want to glitch with what I think you could reasonably describe as like a featured interaction in a deck you're trying to push. So while of course I'm happy for those of us who are no longer going to get jobbed by Dark Dimension, I am, on the other hand, really hopeful that this also fixes the Ghost Spider issue. Finally, and I never really get the chance to talk about the economy because so often these videos are so focused on the changes that are made in the patch, the balance changes, but they made few enough that I feel like I am justified in including this segment. One of the notes that they gave, and I do think this is important, so really do pay attention, they're discontinuing the double value that you get from purchasing gold. I have no access to their internals to say whether I think this is a mistake or not. But as someone who has sort of had those in my back pocket, I think it's important for other people who may be approaching the game the same way to know that within 30 days, they will be removing those bonuses. So now your first purchase of like the $100 bundle of gold will no longer give you double. Your first purchase of the $50 bundle of gold will no longer give you double. Currently, that is how it works. I am not sure if I would recommend like going and getting them. It's probably going to be better value than anything else they're releasing. And that's sort of what I wanted to talk about, because not only have gold bundles gotten worse over time in terms of the rate of currency acquisition, this is now a sort of direct nerf to our ability to cheaply purchase gold. And it is a nerf to those of us who would consider themselves budget players or deal hunters. I know this isn't the most relevant thing to those of us who are free to play. It is a little bit like, oh, here's the guy complaining that his $100 doesn't go further. Just go buy a AAA game. I get it. But I do think that there is a segment of the community that is willing to spend, even at the rates in this game, as long as they feel like they're getting a good deal. And I just don't know if those bundles are going to be worth it. That 8,000 gold for $100 bundle seems a little steep, where 16,000 gold for $100. Yeah, it's still made up currency, but it gets you a lot farther, right? And I guess I just wanted to be sad about that for a second. It feels like they're making it a little bit harder to, just invest a little bit, pick the good deals, go find the ones like deal hunt and get good value. It's like, I don't know about you, but I like online shopping and finding sales. You know what I mean? I like that. I like finding a deal. And I'm kind of sad that they're like sort of going through and systematically removing all of the ways to do that. But this is mostly just to say, hey, if you were planning on getting those bundles, I'm not going to tell you to go buy them now, but they will be gone in 30 days according to the patch notes. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that video. Let me know what you think about the balance changes to Hellcow, to Black Swan, and to Swordmaster. Let me know if you're as scared of Hela as I am. I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal. And this is me signing off on a very, very scary patch. Y'all have a good one.